Fire. It's not something we think about every day, but it can affect any one of us on any day at any time, with devastating consequences. Fire often happens quickly when we least expect it and without warning. People's perception of fire is often based on media coverage, a tragedy shown on the evening news, an event that happens to other people, somewhere else, but not to me. Last year, hundreds of thousands of families who thought that fire won't happen to me learned a hard lesson to the contrary. Many of these families lost mothers, fathers, children, and grandchildren. They lost their cherished possessions, their homes, and their lives will be forever affected by a tragedy that will never be forgotten. Fire safety experts know that the public is at greatest risk from fires that occur in the home. And while media attention provides an occasional focus on catastrophic fire events that kill tens or hundreds of people, most fire fatalities occur out of the public spotlight, as residential fires consume one or two victims at a time. Hello and welcome to Home Fire Sprinklers, a solution to America's fire problem. I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to learn more about residential fire sprinkler systems. What I hope you'll come away with after watching this program is a firm and factual understanding of America's fire problem and how residential sprinklers can play a crucial role in protecting new homes and the families who will live in them. Over the course of the next hour or so, we'll be spending some time educating you about what a residential sprinkler system is and how these systems work. In the process, we'll debunk some of the common myths and misinformation that cause some people who are not familiar with sprinkler systems to oppose their use. I firmly believe that once you have the facts, you'll begin to see why it's time for residential sprinkler systems to become a standard feature in all new home construction. You know, it's been more than 30 years since I wrote this book on residential sprinklers with the hope of capturing public attention about the potential for sprinklers to dramatically reduce the number of fire deaths in America. In the meantime, roughly 100,000 Americans have lost their lives in residential fires in communities that have not yet embraced this life-saving technology. Putting this death toll into perspective, it's essentially equivalent to wiping out the entire population of a major U.S. city in just 30 years. Each year, residential fires kill more people in the United States than all natural disasters combined. So you might be asking yourself, how is it that this needless loss of so many lives hasn't led to a national outcry? Well, the answer is that residential fires tend to kill people by ones and twos, ducking national attention. So what's the solution? The solution is putting fire sprinklers in the home. It's the last significant piece still missing from America's fire safety plan. This is a sprinkler. To bring you up on the speed on the need for and the benefits of residential sprinklers, we're going to cover a whole bunch of topics in today's program. The first thing we're going to talk about is the residential fire problem. We're going to talk about why we need sprinklers. We're going to talk about what is a residential fire sprinkler system. What will it take to mainstream sprinklers in new homes? To help us with this program, today we've spoken with a whole bunch of people, builders, building officials, fire officials, safety experts, homeowners, and many others to get their perspective on residential fire sprinkler systems. We've also asked some of these folks, including Ron Hazelton, a well-known home improvement expert, to share their perspectives with us on camera. So you got questions? We've got answers. Let's begin by hearing from some of the nation's leading fire experts on America's fire problem.
With all of the progress that has been made in fire safety in the last generation or two, the home is still the most dangerous place for people when it comes to fire. We lose about 3,000 people a year in residential fires. That's about 100,000 people over the last 30 years since we've been talking about residential sprinklers. And so the place where we really have to attack the fire problem if we're going to bring those numbers down further is right in the home.
Well, the fire problem still continues to be, for the most part, at home, where families feel the safest. That's natural because all of us feel the safest at home, but what the data tells us and what fire departments all over the country can tell us is where people sleep and eat, where they have all the things that they're comfortable with is in the very home that they live, and that's where we get the calls from, the being America's Fire Service. We're at the greatest risk. And particularly the two categories of greatest risk are the very young and they're very old, and that pattern continues.
So, America's fire problem is in the home, and our fire statistics clearly show this to be a case. Every 80 seconds, a residential fire occurs somewhere in the United States. This constitutes more than 75% of all United States structure fires. More than 80% of residential fire deaths, totaling nearly 3,000 deaths per year, occur in one- and two-family dwellings. And home fires cause more than $6 billion in direct property loss every year. Recognizing this devastating impact of residential fires, some communities have been taking proactive steps to educate their citizens and their legislators on the importance of reducing these residential fire losses. A great example of this is Orange County, California. The Orange County Fire Authority produced an outstanding video program to demonstrate the positive impact that residential sprinklers can have. Let's watch it now.
Human nature is kind of an interesting little beast. We tend to believe that this stuff just isn't going to happen to us.
Why you don't hear about them saving lives is because it's a non-event.
People who die, children who die, are someone's child.
Property is one thing to save, but a human life's another.
Orange County Fire Authority had a unique opportunity to show the effectiveness of residential sprinklers at a Tustin Air Station. We took two buildings that were fire loaded the same, which means the combustible material inside the buildings were as close to identical as possible. The only difference between the two was one was equipped with fire sprinklers while the other was not.
This room is furnished to represent a typical bedroom. There are pictures on the wall, drapes covering the windows, a bed with pillows and blankets, as well as other items. The fire is started in a trash can. As the fire grows, it starts to make a run up the drapes. It takes just 60 seconds to activate the smoke alarm down the hall. As the temperature rises and the toxic smoke becomes dense, your chance of survival decreases by the second. The temperature in the room has risen so fast that your next breath would sear the lining of your lungs if the toxic smoke hasn't already taken your life. Listen closely. You can hear the hallway smoke alarm melting as the fire, radiant heat, and smoke spread throughout the rest of the structure. This time, smoke and flames attract neighbors' attention.
Fire emergency. I'm walking by a residence at 6830 Super Stallion, and there's fire and smoke actually coming out of an upstairs window.
Once the 911 call has been received, it will take approximately 6 minutes until the first unit arrives on scene.
125 enter 222. We have a six-plex, two-story residence, well involved, unit on the second floor. Start second alarm.
Oak Region 222, copy your request for a second alarm, six-plex well involved, a battalion fire.
It is now 13 and a half minutes into the burn, and the entire room is engulfed in flames. As firefighters enter the structure, they must first extinguish fire that has spread throughout the building, and then make their way towards the point of origin. In this room, the smoke alarm was placed in the bedroom and activates 10 seconds after ignition. In the previous burn, the smoke alarm was located in the hallway and took approximately a minute to activate. We see the same fire behavior displayed as before as it rises from the trash can and continues to grow and become hotter. As it grows and consumes the combustibles on the wall, the fire begins to roll across the ceiling. The sprinkler then activates, cooling down the room, and within minutes puts out the fire. Keep in mind, in the previous burn, the fire department didn't even arrive until 6 minutes after the 911 call.
Common sense would tell you that sprinklers are a good thing, but I had no idea of how dramatic sprinklers can be in actually putting out fires without the presence of firefighters.
On the non-sprinklered side, there was total devastation. The only thing that remained was the frame of the bed and wire hangers in the closet where the clothes once hung.
The fire gutted the entire room. When you looked at the damage throughout the rest of the structure, what I thought was interesting was there was still a substantial amount of damage, but there was no what we call fire loading in the rest of the building, which would mean furniture and other combustibles. So it completely destroyed that entire room.
In fire prevention, what really surprised us was the temperature. And not the temperature at the ceiling, which we expected to rise quickly, but how quickly the temperature rose at the lower levels. Within 2 minutes, it was over 200 degrees, which made it an untenable space. On the sprinkler side, it was a completely different story. As the fire moved up the walls and started lapping at the ceiling, the sprinkler activated and extinguished the fire within a very short period of time.
You had a little bit of scorching on the wall, some damage to the container where the origin of the fire was in the trash can, and a little bit of water, and that was pretty much it.
There's no question that fire sprinklers save lives. There's no question that they work. The reason why you don't hear about it is that it is a non-news event, in that nobody dies, seldom is there an injury, and there's very little property damage. We'll respond units. By the time we get there, we cancel the rest of the units as a small mop-up operation, and that's all that's done.
I understand that developers, people who build homes and apartments in commercial buildings, have a lot of heartburn over sprinklers because they do add cost, they add expense to construction. But I would suggest to you that any developer, any builder who actually sees a demonstration, a real-life demonstration of what sprinklers do will change their mind rather quickly.
What really convinced me was how quickly the sprinklers attacked the fire, how quickly the temperatures dropped, and it would have given, I think, any occupant a reasonable opportunity to get out.
This is one of those add-ons that is just a kind of a no-brainer, it seems to me. Yeah, you're going to pay another, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 in the price of your home for sprinklers, but look what you get for it. I mean, people are paying far more than that kind of money for some ridiculous cosmetic improvements in their homes, and they pay it willingly.
People see fire sprinklers portrayed differently in the Hollywood through movies. For example, you might see the prankster that takes a match and lights off a sprinkler head, and then the whole building, all the sprinklers start spraying water, and that just doesn't happen. It's just the one sprinkler head over the fire, and as the fire grows, there may be a few other sprinkler heads that activate, but you don't have the deluge throughout the entire structure like they portray in the movies.
Residential fires are not only dangerous to civilians, but to firefighters as well.
When you see what it is that firefighters have to do and the risk they have to place themselves to fight a fire that otherwise would have been out before they even arrived, I mean, it's frightening. It's so dangerous, and this eliminates the danger. Eliminates it.
The advantage to having a residential sprinkler system installed is that's basically like having a full-time firefighter 24/7 on duty right there in every single room of your house, ready to activate at any given moment, and they will have that fire extinguished before the fire department even arrives.
I think if city councils had an opportunity to see the demonstration that I saw, and if OCFA could present information on the actual cost, that I believe that the majority of councils would be convinced that their residents would be protected by residential fire sprinklers at a minimal cost.
A month after this demonstration, Orange County experienced 2 similar residential fires, both starting in the kitchen. During the first fire, a young female teenager was taking an afternoon nap while the fire advanced through the house and took her life. 2 weeks later, a 6-month-old baby girl was left unattended in a high chair when a fire ignited. As the fire grew, fire sprinklers activated, sparing the child's life.
Here we live in one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world, and yet we're allowing people to die in residence because of no sprinklers. I mean, every fire that I've gone to where there's been a fatality, had there been fire sprinklers there, not only would the damage been minimized, but a person would be alive to tell about that.
Any developer, any builder who actually sees a demonstration, a real-life demonstration of what sprinklers do will change their mind rather quickly. You cannot put a price on life.
That's quite a story, isn't it? One concept presented in the Marble Mountain Burn video that deserves some very special attention is this concept called flashover. A primary component of residential fire safety is stopping fires before they get too big. Once a fire begins open flame burning, the clock begins to tick. The fire will grow rapidly, much faster than most people understand. In a matter of minutes or less, a fire can grow from a small flame to become an inferno that no one can survive. That inferno is called flashover.
Very simply put, you have less than 3 minutes to exit a home that is burning. Unfortunately, even working smoke alarms is going to make it very difficult for people to exit their home. So it's very important that they put sprinklers in. Obviously, the fire will be put out immediately, and they'll have plenty of time to exit their house.
People think they have a lot more time to get out of a burning building than they actually do. And in fact, because of things in our homes, the amount of time you have to get to safety has been shrinking over the years. We now know that a fire can go from first ignition to flashover in just 3 minutes. That's no time at all. That's why sprinklers offer such peace of mind, because as you're getting your family to safety, that sprinkler, often just one, is controlling the fire, even putting it out.
The whole purpose of home fire sprinklers is to prevent flashovers. If I can prevent flashovers in a house, that'll save lives of the citizens as well as our firefighters.
Well, now we've heard about flashover, but let's take a rare and inside look at a very dramatic flashover event that was shot by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's truly amazing how fast a fire can grow when all of the conditions are right for things to go wrong. In this case, the simple combination of a family's Christmas tree with a faulty light leads to devastating results. Imagine, if you would, that you just returned home from a holiday party at the office and you went to your bedroom to sleep. Unfortunately, you forgot to water your Christmas tree in the rush of the holiday season. In seconds, the room is engulfed in fire, so quickly that even a smoke detector may not save your life. You are witnessing flashover. Not all flashover events happen this quickly. Typically, a flashover occurs roughly 3 to 4 minutes after flaming combustion begins in a residential environment. Even so, there's not much time for a family to become aware of a fire and safely evacuate. Now that you understand the concept of flashover, let's take a look at a particular chart comparing the growth of fire with time and events. This chart clearly shows that even in a best-case scenario, the fire department may not be able to arrive quickly enough to rescue trapped occupants and to save a home. This is called the time temperature curve. As you look at that particular curve, you're going to see that there's a point where smoke detector activates, a residential sprinkler activates, the fire department responds, etc. It's all about time and combustion. So in summary, we need sprinklers to ensure that a residential fire won't reach flashover. No other fire safety system available today can prevent a flashover in a home. You may have heard some people suggest that by installing smoke alarms in new homes, there's no need for sprinklers. And you know what? That's simply not true.
You should have these in your home, working smoke alarms. They're an essential early warning device. But these home fire sprinklers take fire protection a step further. In less time than it would take most fire departments to arrive on the scene, home fire sprinklers can contain and usually put out a fire. In fact, installing home fire sprinklers and smoke alarms reduces the chances of dying in a home fire by more than 80%.
New research is indicating that there are some limitations to the protection a smoke alarm will offer. For example, we're finding out that little children often sleep right through the conventional smoke alarm, and that older people often have trouble hearing the alarm, so it may not offer them protection either. That's why sprinklers add such an additional layer of safety and benefit to people.
It's universally agreed that smoke alarms are largely responsible for the significant drop that we've seen in fire fatalities over the past 20 years. But having said that, I'd like you to make you aware of 3 issues to convince you that relying solely on smoke alarms is not a good idea. First, as smoke alarms age, their reliability declines. This concern prompted smoke alarm manufacturers to begin stamping an expiration date on each unit, indicating a 10-year replacement cycle. 2 questions before us are how many alarms will actually be replaced at that 10-year interval, and what will happen to the reliability of alarms that are not replaced. Second, there's an issue related to the waking effectiveness of smoke alarms. In a study completed in 2006, only 58% of a test group of children, ages 6 to 12, awakened when a standard smoke alarm sounded, and only 38% of that test group successfully evacuated. And finally, you need to know that the number of fatalities in homes protected with working smoke alarms is on the rise. Statistics from the 1990s show that 1 in 5 fire fatalities occurred in a home with a working smoke alarm. More recent data from 1999 to 2001 shows that nearly 1 in every 3 fire fatalities occurs in a home with a working smoke alarm. So in summary, let's make sure that you got this story straight. Sprinklers complete the home fire safety package. Smoke alarms are important, but they're only alerting devices, and on their own, they do nothing to stop the spread of fire, to protect occupants who cannot protect themselves, or to protect property, or to protect firefighters. Sprinklers do all of these. Another issue you may have heard about is that residential fires are a function of a home's age and that new homes are safe enough without sprinklers. Many people buy into this argument because on the surface, it sort of seems to make sense. However, further analysis actually paints a slightly different picture.
Old homes will burn just as new homes will burn. And old homes are not any more likely to burn than a new house. It's the people in the house and their activities that will cause most of the fires. A kitchen fire doesn't matter if it's an old house or a new house. We've had an awful lot of fires in new houses since we passed our ordinance, and the sprinkler systems have worked extremely well. And the other part of that is how long does it take for a new house to become an old house? Is it 5 years now? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? The houses we built 20 years ago, would they be considered old houses? Well, here in Scottsdale, our old houses have sprinkler systems.
Today's houses are built in such lightweight construction. Pre-engineered trusses, pre-engineered floor joists, and the walls are being so much different than they used to be, the wall coverings. But more importantly, with this pre-engineered trusses and floor joists, we're seeing houses fail very quickly. There's been many studies being conducted at this time to see what can be done to make this lightweight construction more safe for our firefighters.
There are some significant issues with the construction features of new construction in this era when there is fire in that structure. For instance, lightweight truss construction.
In one short generation, let's say 30, 40 years, the home environment has changed significantly. We've gone from products that were based primarily on natural materials such as wood, wool, cotton fibers, to now primarily all the products that we purchase are synthetic-based materials, oil-based synthetic materials. These synthetic materials have a higher heat of combustion, meaning they have more energy per unit pound or per unit mass. In addition to that, we found that the home environment typically now includes many products that we did not have 30, 40 years ago. Multiple television sets, computers, other types of products which are made of these synthetic materials. So the overall fuel load has increased not only in terms of the materials used, but the bulk of the materials as well.
So what's the bottom line? The age of a home in itself is not a significant factor in determining fire risk, in part because the age of a home has nothing to do with the 3 main causes of fire: men, women, and children. While it is true that there are more fires in older homes versus new homes, this has to be expected given that the median age of homes in the United States, according to a recent HUD study, is 32 years. By sheer numbers, a lot of people live in older homes. But no matter whether a home is old or new, there's one group of people who are always at risk when a home burns: firefighters.
Hi, I'm David Kerr, Fire Marshal for the City of Plano, Texas. I'm very familiar with the benefits of fire sprinklers to the fire service and to firefighters. I hope you'll talk about these important benefits with your audience.
The whole idea with residential sprinklers is to provide a means to deal with fires in structures in a quick and efficient manner, to hold the fire in check and potentially to extinguish it. What that does in the relationship with the fire service is it creates less of a dangerous environment to firefighters because it's providing that control mechanism to keep that fire from getting out of hand.
We've seen a dramatic reduction in fires in the United States, but the number of firefighter fatalities per 100,000 structure fires is exactly the same in 2006 as it was in 1978. One of the primary issues, one of the drivers here has got to be firefighter safety. You know, if we can prevent a fire, if we can extinguish it quickly, if we can contain it, that is the best firefighter safety we can have.
Well, here in Scottsdale, the safety applies to everybody. It applies to all the citizens, it applies to the community, and it also applies to our firefighters. This has to be one of the safest communities to be a firefighter in, because most of the fires, or a lot of the fires, will be contained with this automatic sprinkler system activation.
The purpose of NFPA 13D is to prevent flashover. This is the first line of defense once a fire breaks out, to prevent flashover. And as a fire chief, I have the responsibility to ensure that for the safety of our firefighters.
Well, it's pretty clear that residential fire sprinklers can be a valuable tool in protecting a community's firefighters. And to put a perspective on what our group of experts just said, I'd like to share with you a couple of cold, hard facts that we in the fire service simply cannot ignore. First off, firefighters are at greater risk fighting fires in 1- and 2-family dwellings than any other single occupancy group. Almost half of the line of death duty fatalities occur in these occupancies. But looking beyond fatalities, it is also true that more firefighters are injured in the line of duty in 1- and 2-family dwellings than any other single occupancy classification. While some people might simply dismiss injuries as unimportant as compared to fatalities, a firefighter injury can have a great consequence not only to the firefighter and his or her family, but to the community as a whole. Consider this, simply from a financial perspective. The cost to a community related to long-term care for a disabled firefighter who is injured in the line of duty can be as much as 10 times the benefits paid out to the line of duty death person. In fact, the cost of a health care for a firefighter who is severely burned in a flashover could be as much as $1 million in just a year. This can be a tremendous financial burden to a small community with only a few firefighters. Okay, it's time to change gears. Now that we've spent some time talking about the need for residential sprinklers, let's explore exactly what a residential sprinkler system is.
What is a residential sprinkler system? It's actually a very simple system that's nothing more than a water supply, pipe, and sprinklers. Contrary to popular belief, it's not complex like a commercial system. There are no major valves, there are no standpipes, no fire department connections. Alarms are not necessarily required, nor are storage tanks. So it's nothing more than pipe supplying water to a sprinkler to protect a home.
Let's take a look at a typical residential fire sprinkler system. Now, like the plumbing in a house, a fire sprinkler system is a network of piping that runs in the ceiling and behind the walls. Sprinklers will be installed on ceilings or walls. Only one sprinkler will be needed for most rooms. 2 or 3 will protect a larger room.
Well, thanks, guys. That was really a great introduction. But now let's get into a little more detail about residential sprinkler systems. To do that, I'd like to introduce Jeff Shapiro. He's a fire protection engineer from Austin, Texas, who's a well-known advocate of residential sprinklers. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Ron. You know, I really admire you and all the work that you've done to promote residential sprinklers over the past 30 years, and it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you on the program today.
Okay, Jeff, let's just get right into it. We hear a lot about a concept called NFPA 13D, residential sprinkler systems. How about sharing with our viewers what we mean when we refer to an NFPA 13D system?
Ron, as you know, there are 3 standards that govern the design and installation of sprinkler systems. NFPA 13, which deals with commercial buildings like stores and warehouses. NFPA 13R, which deals with multifamily occupancies up to 4 stories tall. And NFPA 13D, which deals with 1- and 2-family dwellings and townhouses. NFPA 13D has 3 primary goals. The first is to prevent flashover, and we've just seen how important that is. Saving lives, typically limiting property damage in the process, and third, low cost. As compared to NFPA 13 and 13R systems, we reduce the cost of NFPA 13D, making the systems more affordable by making some changes to the design. In an effort to balance the cost and safety, NFPA 13D permits fire sprinklers to be omitted from attics, concealed spaces, small closets, small bathrooms, and garages. And the reason is fire statistics indicate that fatal fires really rarely start in these areas of the home, and we save a lot of money by not providing sprinklers in them. If you take time to read it, Ron, you'll find that NFPA 13D is really a very simple standard with respect to design and installation requirements. And while it may look complicated on the surface, there really isn't much to it.
Well, thanks, Jeff. That was very helpful.
You're welcome, Ron. Now I'd like to spend a couple of minutes giving our viewers a little more detail about how sprinklers operate and about the differences between residential and commercial sprinklers. But before I do that, I think it's time to put one of the biggest myths about residential sprinklers and sprinklers in general to rest.
The sprinkler system, if it is activated, it's not going to go off all over the house. It's going to be localized to where that fire is.
One of the misconceptions on sprinkler systems when you watch TV is when one goes off, the whole place is flooded. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Only the head above the fire is the head that goes off. And that the water damage is really minimal because it's a small amount of gallons per minute, but it puts the fire out.
Each sprinkler is individually activated at a temperature somewhere between 135 and 165 degrees. The sprinkler releases the water, extinguishing the fire. There's a common misconception that the entire sprinkler system can be activated at one time. That's not true. Only the sprinkler closest to the fire will turn on, spraying water directly on the fire. In a spreading fire, a second sprinkler may activate. But in fact, 90% of fires are extinguished by just one sprinkler. The odds of an accidental discharge are 1 in 16 million. You've got a better chance of being hit by lightning.
So a sprinkler is nothing more than a heat-sensitive plug on a water pipe that distributes water in the event of a fire to put the fire out. The heat-sensitive element might be a glass rod that'll break when exposed to high temperatures, or it might be metallic fins like on this sprinkler, or some other method of responding to heat. Regardless of the operating mechanism, I hope that you will remember, watching this program today, each sprinkler in a residential sprinkler system operates independently, and only sprinklers exposed to heat from a fire will operate. Here's some great video of sprinklers in action. On this video, you see the water coming out as the rod breaks. That's how the sprinkler operates. Here you have the adhesive on the cap melting. A couple seconds later, the link melts and water comes out on the fire. And here's a great cutaway shot of a concealed sprinkler operating. You get to see the cap drop, the deflector drops down, and a couple seconds later in a fire, the heat from the fire operates the element of the sprinkler system. There are 2 important differences between residential sprinklers and commercial sprinklers that you need to know about. First, residential sprinklers always utilize a lightweight operating element to ensure that they respond quickly to a fire. This ensures life safety, and it ensures that sprinklers will activate and attack a fire quickly while it's still small, so that only a minimal amount of water is needed to control or extinguish the flames. Second, the discharge patterns for residential sprinklers are uniquely designed to throw water high on the walls so that water reaches the perimeter of the room where furniture is likely to be located in a residential environment, like the sprinkler that you see on the bottom right. By throwing water almost horizontally, the water spray travels through the hot gas layer, retards the heating of the smoke layer and impedes flashover, helping to prevent the fire from climbing the walls and helping to prevent ignition of materials located above the level of sprinkler protection. Now let's look at another concern that we commonly hear about when discussing residential sprinklers: leakage and mold. This is a concern we often hear about from builders, code officials, homeowners, and others when discussing sprinklers for new homes. In fact, 48% of homeowners who say they wouldn't want a sprinkler in their home cite a concern for leakage as the primary reason. Well, it's time to put this concern to rest.
Leakage from the sprinkler system, we personally have not had a problem with that.
As a builder, any additional water systems in your house, you know, potential for leaks and potential for damage makes you nervous. But, you know, if you get a good contractor and they have a good system and lay it out well, and we haven't had any problem.
So the truth is that sprinkler systems are not prone to leakage or mold damage, and the key to preventing leakage from a fire sprinkler system is the same as for any domestic plumbing system: a quality installation by a good contractor. You can have confidence in sprinkler system components resisting leakage for the life of a home because these components are more thoroughly tested than any other plumbing component that goes into a home today. Let's take a look at the process that a sprinkler system component has to go through to gain a listing by Underwriters Laboratories.
Well, UL's basic mission is essentially working toward making our world a safer place to live in. UL is a not-for-profit, independent testing and certification organization that undertakes comprehensive investigations to determine whether or not products meet product safety requirements. We've been certifying sprinklers for more than 100 years now. Actually, I think the first certification occurred in 1902, so I think it's fair to say that we have a little bit of experience in this area and expertise, and we know a little bit about what we're doing. Just for the sprinklers themselves, there's over 30 different tests that are applied to determine whether or not they are going to perform as intended out in the field. There are strength tests as well as tests to determine the ability of the sprinkler to resist leakage. There's operation tests to determine that the sprinklers will perform as intended under various conditions out in the field. There's exposure tests to determine that they'll perform under conditions where they may be corroded. Of course, there's water distribution and fire tests. The fire test that we use for residential sprinkler does simulate a fire that may occur in a living room of a home with combustible walls, and we have a simulation of a chair and a couch that's located in the corner of the room, and it represents one of the most challenging fire situations out in the field that you can expect in a home. The UL 1626 fire test permits a maximum of 2 sprinklers to operate during the test. There are a number of tests that are included in the standards to evaluate the ability of both the piping and the sprinklers to resist leakage, have the appropriate strength characteristics. For example, just the sprinklers themselves are required to have a pressure rating of at least 175 psi, which far exceeds the typical pressure that you'd find in a home. Both the piping and the sprinklers are required to withstand high pressures, basically up to 500 psi pressure without rupture or leakage. So in addition to these high pressure tests, we have pressure cycling tests where we simulate pressure surge conditions that may exist in the home, as well as we conduct vibration tests to determine that the piping and the sprinklers will perform as intended when you experience normal building vibration. So there is a very extensive series of tests to determine that these products will perform out in the field, and that's probably why that they've had a very good field record for the years that they've been in service.
As you've seen, sprinklers, sprinkler system piping and fittings are held to a much higher standard to ensure their reliability. To be listed, sprinklers themselves must pass a 700 psi hydrostatic strength test, a 500 psi leakage test, a 100,000 cycle water hammer test, and a temperature cycling test, and many others. In addition, sprinkler piping and components are rated for 175 psi, which is far more than the required 80 psi rating for domestic plumbing equipment.
Well, that's very interesting, Jeff. That should give everyone a high level of comfort about the reliability of fire sprinkler components. We all know that there are no 100% guarantees about product performance, but fire sprinklers have a history of more than 100 years of saving lives and property that continues today. However, there's another topic that I've been asked to cover in our presentation today that I'd like your help with, Jeff. What can you tell us about piping options for residential sprinklers?
Well, Ron, when you talk about piping options, there are really two subjects to cover. First is the materials that are permitted to be used in sprinkler piping, and second is the approach to laying out the piping system itself. With respect to materials, there are three commonly used options for residential sprinkler systems: CPVC, PEX, and copper. CPVC is chlorinated polyvinyl chloride, and PEX is cross-linked polyethylene. Steel doesn't tend to be used very often because of some other issues. CPVC and PEX seem to be the materials of choice because they tend to have a cost advantage over copper. Nevertheless, materials used in a home fire sprinkler system really tend to be driven by the local market preferences for plumbing materials. And people tend to avoid steel, as I mentioned, because it's really not suitable for potable water, and by having to install backflow prevention, that creates an additional burden. Model plumbing codes don't require backflow prevention for CPVC or PEX or copper because these materials are suitable for potable water systems.
Wait a minute, Jeff. Backflow prevention isn't required for sprinkler systems? What about brackish water setting in a sprinkler piping that leaks back into the home's water system or back into the municipal water supply?
Well, Ron, concerns about stagnant water from sprinkler system piping in CPVC, PEX, or copper, they're highly overblown. If you have a hose bib, a sink, or a toilet in your home that you never use, or perhaps you've plumbed a rough end for a bathroom that you've never installed, you've got dead-end plumbing in your home today. That plumbing is no different than dead-end sprinkler piping in a home when the material is suitable for potable water has been used. So, in fact, in my case, I've got a 30-foot dead end in my home going to a wet bar that I never installed, and I'm living proof, Ron, that there's no problem with dead-end pipes in a home.
If that's true, Jeff, me too. Okay, so what can you tell us about the options of laying out those piping systems?
Well, Ron, there are basically two approaches. These are commonly referred to as one-pipe and two-pipe systems. Two-pipe systems are the traditional approach. They include separate and dedicated piping systems for domestic plumbing and fire sprinklers. A one-pipe system is also commonly referred to as a multi-purpose system, and in these systems with a one-pipe approach, you use a single distribution system to supply cold water domestic plumbing fixtures and fire sprinklers. Both approaches are approved by NFPA 13D, and both are being used in practice today all over the country. I'm often asked whether one approach is better than the other, and I honestly think that the answer is it depends. I've seen contractors installing two-pipe systems very cost-effectively, and I've seen contractors doing the same with one-pipe systems. I think it has a lot to do with what people are used to and how creative they are in the system design. Ron, with respect to one-pipe or multi-purpose systems, I'd like to share with you a personal story that really got me involved in residential sprinklers. A few years ago, I got involved with my local Habitat for Humanity affiliate in Austin, Texas, where I live, installing residential sprinkler systems in Habitat homes, modeling the work of Chet Shermer and others in the Carolinas. And our local Society of Fire Protection Engineers chapter approached Habitat and asked whether we could install sprinklers in Habitat homes. The project became a huge success, Ron, and our systems, which in our case we use a CPVC loop in the attic that serves both domestic and plumbing fixtures and sprinklers, are going in for just over 50 cents a square foot, and that includes the value of parts and installation. Ron, here's a more detailed look at how multi-purpose systems are working really well for us in Austin, Texas.
Austin Habitat is now celebrating our 22nd year. We've completed almost 200 homes here in the Austin community for low-income families to meet their dreams of homeownership.
Austin Habitat for Humanity began installing fire sprinklers in all their homes in 2004 using a simple multi-purpose design that supplies domestic plumbing and fire sprinklers from the same piping system. To date, more than 30 Austin Habitat homes have been protected by residential fire sprinklers, joining hundreds of sprinklered Habitat for Humanity homes nationwide.
I first learned about residential fire sprinkler systems when I joined Austin Habitat for Humanity in early 2004. It was a program that was just about to be started with this affiliate in conjunction with the Austin Fire Department and Western States. Before we had the loop fire sprinkler system, we just did the standard copper or PEX in slab to the fixtures in the house, standard operation. The sprinkler systems are very easy to install. There's a slight learning curve for the plumber in the very beginning, but after the second or third house, they realize it's just gluing pipe together. It's a very easy, quick, fun system to do.
This is not rocket science. It's just something that needs care. Care needs to be taken, but it's not that difficult.
We install the plumbing system today essentially with the loop in the attic. We have CPVC with a certain number of drops to the fixtures throughout the house. But when you think about it, the only difference between a toilet and a sprinkler is which way you turn the T.
Basically, we put a trunk line up in the ceiling, and we put the sprinklers at the prescribed distances from walls, things like that. And then we make sure that we take a potable water source off, like to a hose bib or the bathtub or something on fairly regular intervals.
The installation of the sprinkler systems in our homes have added really just a couple of hours extra to the entire process of top out in our homes. It's pretty negligible.
I can see the trend going to where the regular building inspectors, plumbing inspectors are going to be looking at sprinkler systems. But the sprinkler systems are so simple, they're easy to inspect. I think multi-purpose fire sprinkler systems are a wonderful addition to a home. You have the fire sprinkler system attached directly to the domestic water, makes a simple, easy system that's very dependable.
I know of 3 Habitat affiliates that have experienced the saving of a home because the fire sprinkler system was installed. In each of these cases, there was a fire in the kitchen and a single sprinkler head went off, putting out the fire and saving the home for that family.
Austin does not have a residential sprinkler code. We don't require sprinklers in 1- and 2-family homes. Habitat introduced the Austin Fire Department to that concept, and in installing residential sprinklers in 1- and 2-family homes with the Habitat, it has enlightened the Austin Fire Department enormously on what can be done.
You know, that's really a good story, Jeff, but I got to stop here and make sure we refute a rumor. That plumber is not my dad. Okay? But that's a great story.
You got a relative in Austin, Texas, Ron.
Right.
Hey, I can tell you, Ron, I get a really good feeling at night when I go to bed knowing that one day I may have helped to save someone living in one of Habitat's homes if there's ever a fire. One other point that I'd like to make about multi-purpose systems that I'd really like to clear an issue up. A lot of folks have heard about Worsbo systems, which involve a network of half-inch PEX piping to supply the plumbing and residential sprinklers. And it's commonly misconstrued that these are the only types of multi-purpose systems. And Ron, in fact, you can make a multi-purpose system out of CPVC, as we did in our Habitat homes, or PEX. And in addition to UPON or Worsbo, which we spoke about a little while ago, the Worsbo, Rehow is another company that supplies PEX for sprinkler systems. But Rehow uses larger diameter piping, and they don't use a network layout.
Mm-hmm. Well, so far, Jeff, we've talked about piping. And piping implies that it's full of water at different times. What about protecting piping from freezing?
Great question, Ron. I went out and spoke to some people about freezing, and I'd like to share with our viewers what they had to say.
People need to understand that the sprinkler pipings are no more subject to freezing than any other piping system in your regular plumbing system throughout the house.
Well, in Prince George's County, we do live in a climate where we get a little bit of snow and freezing weather from time to time. And initially, we had a couple issues regarding freeze-ups. We found that some of the piping may not have been routed just right, or the insulation wasn't just right. But working with the stakeholders, the parties involved, we were able to come up with solutions to that. And today, we don't have those type of issues with, again, over 50,000 dwelling units that have sprinklers in them.
You have fears that they're going to leak, one pipe's going to freeze, but the reality is we haven't had any of those problems. If you find a competent contractor, he's going to make sure you don't have that problem.
We actually had a few incidents where a builder called and was like, hey, you need to come up here, your sprinkler pipe's busted, and we arrive and it's the plumbing pipe.
Pretty classic story, Ron. You know, the bottom line is that a sprinkler system poses no greater risk of freezing than any domestic plumbing if the system is properly designed and installed. Freeze-ups result from design and installation errors that can occur with any plumbing system, and it's incorrect to suggest that sprinkler systems in cold climates are predisposed to freezing. Jurisdictions with severely freezing climates in mountainous and northern states from New York to Alaska have adopted residential sprinkler ordinances, and these would surely have been repealed if freezing problems were widespread. Ron, common sense tells you that widespread freezing problems with sprinklers would generate enormous political backlash in jurisdictions where sprinklers have been mandated, and it simply hasn't happened. By properly using insulation and keeping pipes out of attics, using sidewall sprinklers and other proven approaches, there is no reason for a sprinkler system to be at risk of freezing when the installation is done by a competent contractor.
Well, that's good information, Jeff. Let's move on to another thing. What about water demand? You know, some people would like us to believe that sprinklered homes place a bigger demand on the water infrastructure than unsprinklered homes. What can you tell us about that?
Ron, as you know, it's simply not true that sprinklered homes place a bigger demand on local water systems than an unsprinklered home. And, you know, we went out and spoke to some experts on this subject as well. Here's what they had to say, Ron.
In an actual fire incident, when the sprinkler head goes off, you're going to flow anywhere from 15 to 20 gallons a minute. If our fire guys respond and actually put that fire out, they'll be flowing between 150 to 200 gallons a minute. Now, when that occurs, there's a big difference in the amount of water flowed to control that fire. If our fire guys are putting it out with a hose, typically the fire's bigger. There's going to be much more water damage in the house than if we have one head that controls the fire at the point of origin. A little water early on will put out a lot of fire. A lot of water later on will put out a fire. And we're going to bring a lot of water if we come with our hoses.
The reality is, if you have a kitchen fire, which majority of your fires are going to be kitchen fires, the fire department comes in, they're going to put 140, 150 gallons a minute onto that fire. You're going to wind up with a lot of water damage, a lot of smoke damage. And with the sprinkler system, the heads automatically come on only where the heat source is. So if you reach the heat source, 165 degrees, that activates the head, that is the only head in the whole house that will go off.
We support the fact that the water will come on in the room where the fire is located. And instead of putting thousands of gallons on an entire structure, when maybe the fire is contained to one room, the sprinklers come on, obviously you're going to use a lot less water. And from a life safety and property standpoint, it makes just so much sense to say, let's get the fire out before the fire department ever even arrives on the scene.
You know what that really says is that sprinklered homes actually place less demand on a local water system than unsprinkled homes. I'd say that's another myth busted. Jeff, I'd also like to ask you, can you install a sprinkler system in a home where there's a well or a domestic system that's different than articulated water supplies using a 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter?
Ron, the short answer is yes to both questions, and it's being done every day across the country. We went out and spoke to some experts on this topic as well, and here's what they had to say on meters and wells.
I've heard many people say that you cannot sprinkler a home when it's connected to a well. That statement simply is not correct. In many ways, a well system is easier to design a residential sprinkler system. That's because you have control of the pressure. You can set the actual pressure, which makes it easier to design and size the system. When a home is connected to a well system, in all likelihood, there will be a tank and pump in the home on the lowest level. When you have a residential sprinkler system, you merely increase the size of the tank and the pump. The bottom line is, it's no big deal to connect a residential sprinkler system to a well. We do it all the time. There are many design options available for connecting to a well.
In some cases, water pressures are low. We do have to provide either booster pumps, and in other areas we do work, there's no public water, so we have to put a pump and tank system, which is what works off of well systems.
When you have public water, you use that, and if you have a well situation, they use the tanks and pumps. So there's no problem with wells in the sprinkler systems at all.
Here in Scottsdale, we design our residential systems to work off of the domestic supply for the home. And typically the number of fixtures in a house will be sufficient to supply the design for residential sprinklers. And so there's been no issue at all with running it through the water meter. One, because you don't use water unless you actually have a fire, and you're going to want to use it at that point in time. And two, the pipe that we use is potable pipe, so it's not an issue as far as any contamination or anything else like that.
We still have fire hydrants, but we're allowing their flows to be more towards the minimum range so that we know with the homes being protected that we don't need all those high fire flows. We just need the bare minimum.
Ron, I think it's important to emphasize that the water supply for a sprinkler system is only required to accommodate 1 or 2 operating sprinklers for a period of 7 to 10 minutes, meaning that the demand on a municipal water system or a well really is not that significant. You know, in many cases, a 200 to a 300-gallon tank and a pump is used to supply the sprinklers, and the tank and pump systems can be installed for roughly $1,000. There's no requirement for a special tank or a special fire pump, or a backup power supply. So in cases where the refresh rate on a well is slow, or the municipal water supply is lacking, or perhaps there's a hefty standby fee or a capital recovery fee on the meter, you know, Ron, the best thing to do is go to a tank and pump combination. It's the way to go. In fact, using a pump can save you a lot of money because it reduces piping costs. Once you get the pump in, you can reduce the piping cost by as much as half because you can go from 3/4 inch piping, or from 1 inch piping all the way down to 3/4 inch piping throughout. You know, Ron, that change alone can cover the added cost of a tank and pump installation. And actually, Ron, you can sometimes supply the system directly off municipal water using a 5/8 or a 3/4 inch meter if the supply pressure is adequate. It's all a matter of the available pressure versus the loss through the meter. Ron, the bottom line is the bottom line for all these issues is that we have 2 problems: misinformation and momentum. People need to be better educated about residential sprinkler systems so they don't fall victim to misinformation, and we need to break the momentum of just continuing to do things the way we always have. A creative sprinkler contractor, Ron, they can cut cost and improve value by taking advantage of creative approaches to installing residential sprinkler systems, such as those we've spoken about today, with the goals of reducing water demand and maximizing the efficiency of sprinkler layout to cover compartments. Sprinkler system costs will continue to drop, and that's a win-win for communities and for consumers. We see this type of activity going on today in jurisdictions installing residential sprinklers across the country.
Prior to us starting anything, we have a whole process we have to go through from a design standpoint. We have to know, what size incoming line is coming into the house. We have to figure out what the available water pressure is going to be. Therefore, that helps us on the design with the sprinkler spacing. Sometimes we can maximize a 20 by 20 spacing, or if the water pressure is not that great, we may need bigger pipe sizes, less sprinkler heads. So there's a lot of things to look for when you're designing the system.
In residential, we usually wait for the duct work and the plumbing and the electrical, at least in terms of the recessed lighting, to all be in place before we show up with our pipe. We show up with pipe that's cut to fit on the job, and we work around the obstructions that are in our way. Doing that allows us to have a start-to-finish installation that allows us to get to hydrostatic test much quicker, and allows the builder to get to drywall and his rough inspection much quicker as well.
I actually bring the sprinkler contractors in last just because, we lay the lighting out. We want to make sure we're not blocking any of his heads. He needs to know we're not blocking any of his heads with fans or fixtures or other things of that nature. It really doesn't impact me in terms of timing, whether he's there ahead of the electrician. So like most folks, I guess, we run the HVAC, then the plumber, then the electrician, then they come in and they're sort of the last trade to go through the house.
Some sprinkler guys like coming in with the plumber. We prefer to come in with the electrician so we can line sprinkler heads up with lights on some of these high-end homes that we're doing. It's real important to walk down a hallway and see that all the heads line up with lights, and where we can by code, we try to abide by that.
Years ago, when I first got into sprinklers, we actually tried to drag a plumber into it, thinking, it's water and pipes, and gee, isn't that natural? My experience is if you can find a contractor who's dedicated solely to the fire systems, he's going to know what he needs to do. He's going to be competent. He's going to be helpful. He can be an ally to you. He can be a resource to you, where if you're sort of creating this new job for a plumber, you might be out there on your own, if you would.
You know, Jeff, I was just thinking for a few seconds about that last segment we talked about wells. You know, that response time in the rural part of America is somewhat of a complicated problem. Residential sprinklers are not just an urban issue. They're every bit as much as a rural issue. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you're right, Ron. And, you know, I've heard people say maybe we should only require sprinklers on homes that are supplied with a municipal water supply. But the homes in the rural areas are probably in greater danger than the areas that are municipal because the fire department's not going to be there in time.
That's very true. Well, you know, one other topic that we really need to discuss is this concept of inspection and maintenance. Because I'm often asked about how jurisdictions are going to handle the required inspections of residential sprinkler systems. Some folks begin to express concerns about who's going to do these inspections and whether the inspections are going to add time to the construction process. I'm also asked about whether there are issues with maintaining residential sprinkler systems. I know we've learned some stuff from folks who are dealing with this every day, and let's take a look at what inspection and maintenance issues are out there also.
Mainly, we do most of the inspections on the sprinkler system. Fire department does review the plans, and they do so in a timely manner. It's a deferred submittal, so you don't have to submit the sprinkler plans along with the house plans. We will allow you to defer that submittal till later on, and we turn those around very quickly. Best thing a building official can do is make sure that the inspections are done promptly and timely.
My name is Celso Mata. I'm the Chief Building Official for the City of Plano, Texas. And I'd like to know how homeowners are supposed to maintain and test sprinkler systems.
Sprinkler systems occasionally require a little simple maintenance, which you can do yourself. Make sure that the water shutoff valves are in the open position. Now, it's really easy to tell. An open valve is parallel to the pipe. In the off position, it's perpendicular. But one way to make sure that it never gets turned off accidentally is to lock it. Now, from time to time, you'll also want to perform a flow test. The test valve is labeled like this, and here's how I do it. Oh, and before you open the valve, be aware of where the water's discharging. I open the valve very, very slowly and let the water run to the outside for about a minute to a minute and a half. If you have an alarm, after about a minute you should hear the alarm sound. Once you've verified that the water is flowing and the alarm is working, you want to turn this off slowly. You want to avoid that banging sound that some people call water hammer. Whenever you're painting walls or ceilings, avoid getting paint on the sprinklers or the concealing plates. Dried paint could cause the sprinklers to malfunction.
Well, you know, now our audience should have a sense of residential sprinkler technology and how inspection and maintenance are handled. But let's talk about the reality of mainstreaming residential sprinklers into communities. You know, it's time to make sprinklers a standard feature in all new 1- and 2-family dwellings and townhouses. You know, in this segment, we're going to explore the experiences of several jurisdictions who've actually successfully implemented residential sprinkler ordinances. There are literally hundreds of these jurisdictions across the country, and the trend is growing. Anyone who says that residential sprinklers are too complicated, too expensive, or are unacceptable to the public is wrong. The proof? There are literally hundreds of thousands of homes in the U.S. today that are equipped with residential fire sprinkler systems. In Prince George's County, Maryland, Scottsdale, Arizona, Cobb County, Orange County, California alone, there are well over 100,000 sprinklered homes today. Even if only 1% of the homes that are being sprinklered today occurs, that's roughly adding 15,000 homes per year to our inventory. But our program today is really about what you can do in your community. What will it take to make a residential sprinkler a standard feature in all the new homes in your community? Well, we put this program together, believe that the first thing is the spirit of cooperation.
Well, we use the philosophy of you build it, you protect it. And it took a partnership to do that. We just didn't come up with it and lay down the law. We used a partnership that involved the builders, the building officials, the community development folks, the fire officials, and we put all that together, and I think that was the key to our success.
In Prince George's County, we work very extensively with the builders, the water purveyors, the sprinkler contractors, and other stakeholders to ensure that any issues that came up as part of this entire process were fully addressed so we could move forward. And today we have over 50,000 sprinkled homes in Prince George's County.
Well, I think there's two leadership traits. One is courage, all right, because it requires a tremendous amount of courage to take this issue on in most communities. And the second one is the ability to collaborate, because it can't be forced, it has to be sought, all right? And it requires the fire chief, the code officials to work together toward this issue and to resolve it. It can't be done singularly.
As we went through this process, the building officials became very well educated on what the merits of fire sprinklers were, and actually became some of our strongest proponents for installing fire sprinklers.
The International Association of Fire Chiefs stands ready to work with home builders and code officials to implement residential fire sprinklers in the United States.
Perhaps one of the best examples of a community's successful effort to mainstream residential sprinklers in new homes is the city of Scottsdale, Arizona. They've been sprinkling homes for more than 20 years, and today there are more than 40,000 sprinklered homes in that community.
You know, Ron, some people argue that Scottsdale is different, that their model won't work in other parts of the country. Well, it is true that Scottsdale's different. They took the bold step to become one of the most fire-safe communities in America, but it's not true that their model will only work in Scottsdale. And I think the best way to demonstrate this to our audience is to let them hear firsthand about the Scottsdale experience from the folks who are making residential sprinklers a reality in that community every day.
So in about 1982, Chief Weitzman got with a local developer, and the whole idea and concept of residential sprinklers was just beginning to take foot. So he got with this local developer, and they actually sprinkled 3 houses, and they were allowed to light fires in those 3 houses to see if the concept of sprinklers would work in a residential setting. And the test went extremely well. And we passed the ordinance in 1985, and it went into effect January 1st of 1986. So in essence, from 1986, not only did we sprinkle commercial, but we sprinkled anything that was built in the city of Scottsdale, including single-family residential. When we first passed the ordinance, there was estimates that the city would save $7.1 to $7.4 million in infrastructure costs. The bulk of that is going to be in the water infrastructure, where we've increased the hydrant spacing. The fire flows are reduced anywhere from 50 to 75% because of the fire protection that we have from the sprinkler systems. We also are going to realize some infrastructure costs in the area of roadways. We were able to do some things with roadways in the mountains and in the environmentally sensitive areas that made them a little bit narrower, made them a little bit more with the inclines, gave them some design freedoms that they could use. That has paid off very well. It's given us a whole different atmosphere with the north part of the city and the other areas of the city that you typically don't see in many communities.
When we speak to developers, it's generally about money. That's always a prime concern, and we were able to show them what the cost to install a fire hydrant is, and by spacing the fire hydrants out further apart, they could see in most subdivisions that they were going to be saving some pretty significant money on the spacing of those fire hydrants. From our standpoint, from the water department, a fire hydrant can be a fairly costly expenditure in terms of appurtenance maintenance. We have the capital to install it, and then it's in there for the life of the system. You have to continuously maintain that hydrant. We have the occasional hydrant that's hit by a car, and then that's a fairly large expense. You have to operate the hydrant every year, exercise it, lubricate it. So there's some pretty heavy-duty maintenance that goes into it, whereas the fire sprinkler systems, you put them in, and pretty much you can forget about them. You don't have to operate them every year or maintain them. So from the standpoint of the city, it was a win situation. From the standpoint of the building community, they got to pay less because there was less fire hydrants being installed.
Education is obviously a big part of it, and it's always a big part of it, even today. We had to work with the local officials, the elected officials. We worked with the building industry, we worked with the home builders, we worked with the water department, work with the insurance industry, all of them to understand what the concept of residential sprinklers could actually bring to the community.
It was a partnership among all of the city departments in order to make this project successful. I would say to those who haven't embarked on this that we have 20 years of experience. Don't reinvent the wheel. If someone else has already been through it, you can learn from their experiences. There's plenty of information out there if you go to look for it.
Scottsdale and Rural Metro at the time worked very closely with studying the incidents, understanding what occurred, and documenting what occurred. And then what led to the first report was, in all honesty, I just got tired of the fire service getting beat up every time that they proposed residential sprinklers. The myths that were out there, the inaccuracies, the falsehoods, did not match up with our experiences for the first 10 years in the city of Scottsdale. So the report was primarily written to document what had occurred, actual occurrences, and to assist the fire service, the people in the fire service that wanted to do something like this.
Ultimately, everyone wins. There is no loser in this, and that's why we are so positive about this program. We've been analyzing it for 20 years. We have more experience than anyone in the country that we're aware of, more applications probably than anyone per capita in the country, and we can't find any downside to this.
The initial barriers are political. These systems work. They work extremely well. They'll benefit the community. They'll benefit the individual residents. They'll benefit the fire department. So I think ethically, morally, and economically, communities should really look at this and look at the true facts and not just rely on the misconceptions and the misinformation that's out there. I don't think there's anything the community could do that would benefit them more than protect their community and protect their firefighters through the use of automatic sprinkler protection.
Well, you know, Jeff, nobody can doubt that Scottsdale is a success story. It truly is.
Boy, is it.
But it really brings home the message that residential sprinklers can be an effective part of a community's approach to fire safety. I personally would like to thank Jim Ford, Michael Clack, and Dave Petty for bringing that story to us today. Well, as you know, Scottsdale gets a lot of recognition for being one of the first communities in the United States to mainstream residential sprinklers. And no doubt, a lot of that comes from Fire Marshal Jim Ford's personal effort to record their experience and that well-known document called the Scottsdale Report. However, there are many other communities across this country who have had an equal level of success, ranging from San Clemente, California, where I helped pass one of the nation's first residential sprinkler ordinances more than 20 years ago, to the state of Maryland, whose success story started in Prince George County in the early 1990s.
Prince George's County certainly has demonstrated that residential sprinklers in 1- and 2-family homes really work. And that's allowed us to work with other communities because they've seen the success that Prince George's County has enjoyed by having the sprinklers in the homes. The fire death rate has come down significantly over the years.
When we did our contract, we said that we wanted the sprinkler system. They had already had it in a prior one because it's required currently in PG County, and we feel safe with the sprinkler systems in our current house, and we wanted it in our new house in Charles County. At the time, it wasn't required, but we had them write it in the contract because we wouldn't feel safe living in this house, new house, without the sprinkler systems.
We now have 5 counties out of 23 in Maryland that require residential sprinklers in every new dwelling unit. We also have, in addition to that, 13 municipalities, and we are working with more communities as we speak.
I had exposure to sprinklers 15 years ago doing multifamily, and most recently I got away from that, did only single families, and about 4 years ago here in Montgomery County we're required to do sprinkler systems again. At the end of the day, it probably adds to the bottom line value of the house.
There's been somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 activations of the sprinkler systems, and untold amount of property and lives estimated to be saved because it's a little bit difficult to count something that didn't happen.
Some of the concerns that continually pop up, even in the communities that we're working with now, costs of the systems, whether or not the process of installation can be affected, the code enforcement part of it, so many different myths that we have actually been able to disprove throughout our entire process.
In the 16 years that they've had a residential sprinkler ordinance in effect for all of their new construction, in just about every one of the cases where there was an activation of a sprinkler head, only one head activated. There's a couple cases where there were multiple heads that activated, but in all of those, some type of flammable liquid or accelerant was involved in the fire.
We've actually followed a very good system in the state where we make sure that the fire service is well schooled to begin with the benefits of residential fire sprinklers, the general public, and also public policy makers. We have a system here in Maryland where we require all fire sprinkler installers to be licensed. Plus, with our long-term experience in townhomes and multifamily construction, Maryland's system is well oiled now and is certainly ready to absorb even more communities to adopt single-family residential fire sprinkler ordinances.
Well, you know, after watching those stories from Maryland and Scottsdale, I hope that you're convinced that residential sprinklers can be mainstreamed in any community, east or west. The biggest problem that we face in gaining more widespread acceptance of home fire sprinklers is that of fear of the unknown. Many people that I've run across that oppose residential sprinkler systems have never even seen one, or perhaps they've only seen one or two with no education. They often base their opinion on what someone else told them, or something they've read, written by someone with a bias to stop residential sprinklers. But now you've had the opportunity to hear from folks in the trenches. They're credible. They're experienced people who took the time to explain to you that there's no real reason to fear residential sprinklers. Residential sprinklers have been really good for their communities, and they can be good for your community too.
Hi, I'm Ravi Shah. I'm the Director of Urban Development with the City of Carrollton, Texas. I would like to know what the benefits are for residential sprinkler systems to a community.
Well, the community benefits because it's a life safety feature, and it's going to prevent deaths of not only the people in the homes, it's also going to prevent, if the home starts on fire, from spreading to other homes. And it also prevents the first responders from being killed.
If all new construction that we build in the future could be equipped with home fire sprinklers, it would change so many things about the way we protect communities in our society. I mean, first of all, literally, when combined with a smoke alarm in that building, there is almost no chance that anybody is going to die from a fire in one of those structures. Almost no chance. And the more that we could include sprinkler systems in the homes as a very natural part of that home, the costs of those systems decrease significantly, and the availability of contractors to install them improves significantly. So it would assist fire chiefs in protecting the community.
Having this in place where basically pretty much everything gets sprinkled actually takes a big burden off of the community as a whole. You don't lose as much as what you used to lose, and because of that, I think that helps the community out a whole lot better. Lives are saved because of it, and we're in Nashville where they don't really have that requirement, and they have a lot of big fires, and we're not going to have that many, and we're not going to have that bigger ones.
When a developer comes in and wants to put sprinklers in a home, we'll do absolutely everything we can to make that cost effective for the developer. Some of the things that we can do is give you credits for fire flow, for fire hydrant placement. We can be creative with our access requirements, and sometimes we can even help you get an increased density for the development you want to do.
Customary trade-up options vary, but they can include street width reduction, lowering the amount of pavement per linear foot of street, longer dead-end streets, and the permitted use of T-turnarounds. Increased street grades and building setbacks, additional units with increases up to 20%, not uncommon, elimination of the need to expand water supply, and increased hydrant spacing. According to the Reese-Carr report from Scottsdale, Arizona, the final cost of sprinklers, taking into account the savings from trade-ups, was less than $200 per unit. Many communities also offer building code alternatives that might include a reduction in fire-rated wallboard requirements or reduced fire rating standards for masonry walls and doors.
So we went to a couple of our builders and spoke to them about it, and their first impression was, this is the greatest thing that's happened to us since sliced bread. And I'm thinking, why? Because it's going to increase the price of your home. And it's like, these are the types of things with the people we're trying to attract that they want to see. I'm tickled to death that this community was so proactive in the sprinkler system. And we have really evolved into a community that people now want to come to.
That testimony clearly identifies the fact that the benefits of residential sprinklers to the citizens in a community range from peace of mind and knowing that their families and their homes are protected to protecting the firefighters who serve them. And the developers in those communities also benefit. They gain reductions in construction and infrastructure costs. With all of this in mind, you might be asking yourself, why would anyone oppose residential sprinklers? Well, in my experience, once the facts are on the table, many people drop their opposition. That certainly has been proven to be the case in jurisdictions who already have residential sprinklers, where, contrary to what you might think, we found widespread public support for these systems.
When my father knew I was building the house, he asked for my blueprints and said, I think we're going to put a sprinkler system in. And my dad is not a pushy person by nature. However, on this particular topic, he was, and he insisted. And honestly, it's going to give me some peace of mind. Even though the house is brand new, and people say, you know, you're not going to have a fire in a new house, I don't necessarily believe that, particularly now that I have 3 young children.
I certainly have peace of mind knowing, with respect to fire, knowing that my grandchildren are protected, my daughter's protected. Everybody in the house is protected.
After having grown up in a house that was devastated by fire, I wanted to do anything and everything I could to prevent my children having to go through something like that. And the sprinkler system's there for the life of the house and for our lives.
Apparently, there was an electrical short, and that's what started the fire. That fire was so fast and so furious. The sprinkler system was activated, so it responded immediately to the flames, to the smoke. Our house is still standing. We're still all alive, including our pets, and so it was an enormous success.
I always think of the people right at Christmas Eve or right around the holidays. There's a fire that takes place, and they are put out of their house for the holidays. Or they come home and there's a fire, and they come home to a burned down house. Whereas with a sprinkler system, they can still pretty much live in the house. Again, they have to clean up the water damage, but the displacement factor is severely diminished.
But the people that have had fires in a sprinklered home, almost to a person, have said they would never ever live in a house that wasn't sprinklered. Doesn't matter if it's in Scottsdale or if they move to California or back east, they're going to live in a house that's sprinklered. They understand the benefits, they understand how well these systems work, and they understand the impact that either did or didn't happen to their families.
You have a lot of mothers that really like the sprinkler system, because the thing comes into being is when they have children and stuff, they're little babies and stuff, and they think about that. And in an ever-changing society where there's a lot of, I guess, turmoil and danger, the last place you want is at your house. And so that kind of gives them a little bit more comfort probably than what they ever had before.
My experience has been very good. We had a significant freeze this year. None of my pipes burst as a result. The sprinkler system does not leak. Fortunately, I have not had a fire in my house and don't intend to, but if that unfortunate circumstance were to occur, I've got a great deal of confidence that it'll be put out quickly and promptly and will not disrupt my lifestyle that much.
One individual, you know, he basically said, you know, I didn't really understand it until he sold his house. And the lady came in and she goes, what's that up there? And he said, well, ma'am, that's a sprinkler system. This is a sprinkle house. And she goes, well, I want to buy this house.
We passed our ordinance in 1989, and it was triggered by high-density construction and the need to protect that construction. People at first resisted that because they were concerned about the looks of sprinklers. They were concerned about the cost, but we've shown that to be not even a factor. We have the houses that are fully sprinklered that sell. In fact, we had one of the subdivisions, which was one of our first fully sprinklered subdivisions, was reported back to us by the marketing people as one of the fastest selling subdivisions in the metro Atlanta region. And that really says something when you have an entire subdivision sell out even before they could build the houses. They were all sprinklered, and there were absolutely no negative responses from the people who were buying those houses and continue to live in those houses today.
Here in Scottsdale, we have a whole generation of children that understand homes should have sprinklers. And it's even more apparent if they have had a fire incident in their house. like the people that have experienced it, their children will understand we shouldn't be living in a home that's not protected.
Unless you're looking for them, you don't notice them. Matter of fact, we've had people here and we've talked about having a sprinkler system and they can't tell where it is.
You have a roof, why wouldn't you have a sprinkler system? You're putting in windows, why don't you put in a sprinkler system? You have a floor, why wouldn't you put in a sprinkler system? In other words, it is such an integral part of a solid, safe structure, you can hardly do without it.
Well, perhaps you're thinking, okay, Coleman and his crew found a few folks to get on camera to support sprinklers. But those people don't necessarily represent general public opinion. Well, that's not the case. In fact, a recent national poll of more than 1,000 adults conducted by Harris Interactive found that there is broad public support for residential sprinklers. 45% of homeowners feel that a sprinklered home is more desirable than an unsprinklered home. 69% of homeowners said that having a fire sprinkler system increases the value of their home. And 38% of homeowners said they would be more likely to purchase a home with sprinklers than one without. These results clearly support the assertion that the general public has become more and more aware and has warmed up to the concept of residential sprinklers. With all model building codes now requiring new multifamily dwellings to be sprinklered, it's certainly fair to say public support for residential sprinklers will continue to grow as future home buyers move from sprinklered apartments into new homes. Okay, so that's the public perspective, but I bet you're wondering what some other folks think. Let's hear from them.
I'm Jim Oak, building official with the City of Farmers Branch, Texas, and I'd like to know what home builders think about residential sprinkler systems.
As a builder, number one, I'm thinking of the additional cost that's going to be incurred to the builder that's got to be passed on to the homeowner. And then as a developer, more cost as far as the infrastructure to handle the sprinkler system. So my first inclination was that this is something I'm not real sure about. But after talking with the fire department folks and doing some research on our own and going to some seminars, and I became convinced that fire sprinklers was the only way to go. It was one extra that you had to pass along to a homeowner where they actually receive something back. And by that I mean, if you have a fire sprinkler in your home, not only do you have the peace of mind of the safety factor for your family and the minimized damage in case of a fire, you also get money back, depending on your insurance company, and savings on your homeowner's insurance.
I knew, almost nothing about sprinkler systems when we started, and now I know sort of what a dry head is and what a wet head is and the different types of sprinkler heads, and we do a lot of custom homes, so we like the concealed heads that we use where they're very low profile. You don't really notice them unless you know what you're looking for.
Well, it was another step in the construction phase, and we didn't know how it was going to go. It might hold up progress in construction of the house and how it was going to work. And, of course you have a lot of concerns at the time, until we got started into it.
We have had no problems with any of our sprinklers. And it's definitely a selling feature whenever we go to sell homes, especially for a safety feature, and that's one of the things that we definitely promote in our marketing of our development, because we can put fire sprinklers in less than the cost of upgrading our countertops.
It doesn't hold the process up whatsoever. It's a very easy, simple process. A couple days and they're in and out and they're gone, so, and it works pretty good.
I've been attending the International Builder Show now for 6 years, and in the beginning there used to be a tremendous amount of resistance, and we were not the most popular booth on the block. But in recent years I've found a lot of builders coming up already knowing about sprinklers, wanting to know more, and I think the thing I like the most is when someone comes up and says, I'm a dad and I'm going to be building a home and I want this for my family. That did not used to happen, and it's happening more and more now.
It's an absolute peace of mind. I don't worry about my kids at night, and I'm on my third fire sprinklered home. I'll never live in another home that's not fire sprinklered. And just the thought of having that safety is an added reassurance.
We always put it in our literature, and we always talk to the buyers about it. I believe some of them get rebates or discounts on their homeowners insurance as a result of that. You sure want to pitch that to them.
I think it's great. I mean, we when we first started it, we promoted it as a selling, a safety feature in the homes, and people accepted it, and it helped spark sales.
All builders should include fire sprinklers in their homes. It just makes a lot of sense. It seems like there's less cost in fire departments and trucks and running, expensive equipment when you can have a simple installation in the front end, putting in these systems, and down the road it's going to pay for itself time and time again.
Well, it gives me a good feeling when I go to bed at night. I know that the homes that I built since 1990, the multifamily, and then got into the single family, it gives me a good feeling. Going to bed at night to know that those houses are protected by a sprinkler system, and if something does happen, that I did everything I could to make that house safe as it possibly could be.
Contrary to popular belief, not all builders are opposed to residential sprinklers. In fact, there are many builders who are advocates of these systems, and many who have become so convinced in the value of sprinklers that they install them in their own homes to protect their own families. These builders have overcome the fear factor, that fear of the unknown, and they've found that residential sprinklers can easily be incorporated into everyday construction. Builders with the best business sense are catching on that homes without sprinklers may be obsolete. What a better way is there to attract new homeowners than to convince them that their old homes provide less protection and are obsolete? One last issue we'd like to cover today before closing our program is one that I'm sure that almost all of you have heard about time and time again. In the minds of many, it seems that cost continues to be perceived as the biggest obstacle to mainstreaming residential sprinkler systems. So how much do these systems cost? 50 cents a square foot? $1, $2, $5? Let's hear from some people who can give us the actual facts.
As sprinkler systems become more prevalent, the demand will increase, the price will go down.
The biggest thing with the cost has been that the competition, from suppliers and installers has helped drive the market down.
It was expected the cost of the sprinkler system to be about $1.14 to $1.20 a square foot. And once we made it mandatory and required every home in Scottsdale to be sprinklered, competition kicked in. And what occurred was these guys got better at putting the systems in, they got better at designing them, and the cost has actually dropped. And right now, for a normal tract house in Scottsdale, it's going to be about 70 cents a square foot versus $1.20 a square foot. That's because we have a lot of sprinkler companies out here that are willing to do residential work and can do it very economically and very efficiently.
We have a lot more competition. Years ago, there was only one or two of us out there doing 13D systems, and now with, you can look in the yellow pages and see maybe 20, 30 contractors in this area, and it's helping, it's making competition a lot better.
We found that for somewhere $1 to nickel, $1 dime a square foot, this system can be installed and monitored and put in complete. And that, compared to solid surface countertops, that's no comparison. And then the benefits of the safety factor for your family and the savings on your homeowner's insurance, like I say, it's a win-win.
I did a cost-benefit study and economic analysis of the cost of residential sprinkler systems. And what I found out is that essentially there is no cost of residential sprinkler system, that in most cases the benefits far outweigh the cost.
Our fire chief, Chuck Walker, had gotten some estimates from some other folks, and they were down to between, I believe it was $1.25 and $2 a square foot. And our developers were saying there's no way that you can get people that will put this in for this price. There is a way. These people do it on a daily basis.
To really look at the issue of cost impact on homes and whether sprinklers are going to impact the cost of affordable housing, there's a basic question that has to be asked. What drives the price of a new home? In many, if not most markets, the answer to this question is not construction costs, but instead what the market will bear, with the sales price rising and falling based on what buyers are willing to pay. In such markets, costs associated with mandatory sprinklers are going to be absorbed into the price by adjusting other costs or features or builder markup. Even if there is an increase in the cost of a home based on sprinklers, the impact on a monthly mortgage payment is negligible in the average home. Consider a hypothetical sprinkler system in a $300,000 home, $3,000 sprinkler system. 6.5% mortgage, 5% credit on $2,000 a year on your insurance bill, and a combined federal and state income tax rate of 33%. You know, in this case, the net cost of fire sprinklers after mortgage-related tax deductions for this $300,000 house would be $4.37 per month. That's a 0.23% increase in the monthly mortgage payment, and that roughly equates to the cost of a premium beverage at your local coffee shop. So I pose the question to everyone listening to this program today, just how cheap do sprinklers have to become before they're really considered cost-effective? In summary, Ron, I'd like to say that I've personally overseen the installation of 30-plus sprinkler systems, and that's made a believer out of me in the future of residential sprinklers. This has been demonstrated many times in many jurisdictions across the country where residential sprinklers are required. Housing markets weren't affected by sprinklers. These local experiences are showing us that once a jurisdiction decides to require residential sprinklers, home building is going to continue as it always has. Home prices are going to fluctuate based on the law and supply and demand. Home builders will adjust their products to meet consumer preferences and trends, and home buyers will continue to buy homes. Ron, it's really been a great opportunity to reach out to people today and deliver a message that's been a long time coming, and I really want to thank you and our viewers for giving me the opportunity to spread the word about residential sprinkler systems.
Well, I appreciate you, too, for being here today, Jeff. And I'd also like to thank all the other individuals who gave their time and expertise to help put this program together. I would also like to acknowledge the fact that there were a lot of people who paid the price of getting this concept from an idea to a reality over the years that are not even with us today, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. This book, right now I had it backwards. I would try it this way. This book is now 30 years old. It actually belongs on a bookshelf, along with a bunch of other history books. In this program, we've done our best to educate you on the value of residential fire sprinklers. In my experience, people who oppose residential sprinklers typically do so because of a bunch of myths and misinformation. In our presentation today, we've provided you with facts. We've also provided you with some real-world examples of how residential fire sprinkler systems already benefit communities around this country every day. Though our job as bringing this program is done, your job in using what we've taught you today is just beginning. We encourage you to use what you've learned to educate and inform others. Have other people watch this DVD. To find out more information, you may also want to contact many of the nonprofit safety resources that are listed on the screen that have websites. You know, the next chapter of the residential sprinkler story is probably going to be the final chapter. It's time to solve America's problem. It's time to solve the problem of residential fires in the United States. It's time to have fire sprinkler systems installed. And it's also time for us to close. Matter of fact, we went a few minutes over. But I'm Ron Coleman. Thanks for joining us.
The U.S. Fire Administration, along with a host of other organizations nationally, when America Burning was first published, became a public document. America Burning's very succinctly and yet powerfully said that sprinklers in homes can make a difference. And you know, I get frustrated because what is it that we're waiting on?
There's been a lot of discussion about residential sprinklers for a long time, and we're now seeing codes requiring residential sprinklers. And this is the result of a very long debate that has taken place. A lot of technical information has been brought to the fore. And as with code development, you have to reach consensus before these ideas make it. And I think there is a consensus that one of the most important advances that we can adopt now is to require residential sprinklers. And that's why we include them in our codes. But I think more importantly, I think consumers who are very, very safety conscious are asking about them. They want them, and I think residential sprinklers is an idea whose time has very definitely come.
We saw a tremendous benefit with smoke alarms and seat belts when ordinances were put in place to encourage the rapid expansion of these technologies. For me, sprinklers are the same thing. They should be standard equipment in any home.
I couldn't say these things if I didn't believe in them. I built my home in 1991 in a rural area. My home is fully sprinklered and supported by a tank and pump. I could not in good conscience say these things if I didn't believe it in my heart.
Having the sprinklers has given me a real sense of security, because now we know that if there's a fire in the house, and as in this fire, the sprinklers put it out.
I do have sprinklers in my home, and we've been in our home 17 years now. And I can honestly tell you that each member of our family feels much safer knowing that we have a system in our house that will automatically attack a fire.
Based on what I know about fire sprinklers, I love them, and I think that they'd be a great advantage in my own home.
It means a lot to me that I know that she will be well protected with this sprinkler system and a smoke detector that we'll have in the home.
Sprinklers are not a cost, it's an investment for safety.
Do you not worry? I mean, people put systems in their homes to make sure people don't break in, you know, and you see the commercials to where I have peace of mind because I know that my family is safe. Sprinkler systems do the exact same thing. It's that safety mechanism that's built into you to where I know if something was to happen, my family's going to be safe. If they're asleep and something was to happen, I know my family is going to be safe.